Senator Roberts, you have the call.
Thank you, Chair. What is being done to streamline the payment system for care providers?
Senator, hi, Corey McKenzie from the Service Design and Improvement Deputy CEO. So we have, as Ms Mackay was talking about before, a range of improvements underway through a significant program of work, some of which particularly the crackdown on fraud program of work particularly, but much of that will include progressive improvements to the provider platform and a range of other kind of payment systems to improve and support the continued improvement of the payment system through to providers. We've also
mainly IT focused?
Predominantly IT focused, yeah, that's right. And so both upgrading systems that are at end of life or that are approaching end of life, but also in developments and improvements in terms of improving both the integrity of the data that we're able to capture, and then also our ability to kind of move more quickly and with more confidence in the payment to providers as well.
Okay, thank you. What's being done to set up a scheme to ensure that family members who provide constant care to a family member are compensated for the time and care put in to deal with high-level basic care? Now, I understand families like to take care of other family members, and that I'm not arguing against that. I'm just saying we can see that in some cases we've got pensioners who are on a low income looking after their 60-year-old son who's disabled and very concerned about him. So there are some extenuating circumstances where families need to be compensated.
Thank you, Senator. There's a couple of components to that question. One is, first of all, there is obviously through other portfolios income support payments through carer payments and carer allowances in recognition of some of those activities too. So that's an important part of that. We also recognise that informal care is a really important part of the NDIS, where parents provide informal care for their children with disability. Ageing parents often do the same. But there does come a time where that needs to be a paid care role, and that's when the NDIS supports having paid trained carers to come in and support that person with the disability. So it's a combination of both. Who do you feel comfortable with providing that level of informal care and support and decision-making and assistance in your daily activities? There's the care allowance and carer payments through the Social Security portfolio, and then the NDIS pays for the funded support workers to provide that trained specialist care for the person with disability as well. So it's an ecosystem, a combination of all of those things, and that really does depend on the individual circumstance for the participant. Right.
Now, I presume then there's a very formal assessment required before moving from one to the other.
Yes, but we know that participants like to have their families around them and the informal supports around them, and that's a really important thing. We don't want to distract from that at all. But for some participants, they also need additional funded carers, and there are regulations for being a qualified carer and a registered provider as part of the NDIS system. So, all those things need to work hand in glove to provide that support for the person with a disability.
Thank you. Are all direct care providers to be registered if they wish to be paid under NDIS?
They don't have to be.
And what is registration and what does it involve?
I might defer to the Commission, who can talk through registration guidelines, but there are differences in terms of pricing within the NDIS, but also registration criteria. So I'm not sure if the Commission wanted to respond to registration of providers.
Thank you, Senator. The registration relates to providers. When it comes to workers, there are worker screening that occurs for workers.
So you're looking at their capabilities and their skills?
Worker screening is about suitability. Worker screening is for people who are in risk-assessed roles, and their worker screening checks are conducted by the state and territory worker screening units. The NDIS Quality and Safeguards Commission is responsible for maintaining the database. So registered providers can link their workers who have a worker screening check. And so that's another safeguarding measure so that participants can see which workers have a worker screening check. And in fact, we've had record numbers of unregistered providers also seeking access to the worker screening database so that they can also link their workers.
So people don't, direct care providers don't have to be registered, but for some circumstances they must be.
For some circumstances, they need a worker screening check.
Okay. When will those reforms complete? The ones you both discussed?
I'm wondering, just on the registration topic, Associate Commissioner Wade, if you'd like to speak on this, if you're there.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Glanville. Senator, registered providers are an important part of the disability care system, but there is also provision for the regulator, which is the NDIS Commission, to regulate both unregistered and registered providers. So registration status indicates compliance requirements of a provider, but that does not leave providers unregulated if they are not registered. All providers that receive funding from the NDIS are required to comply with a code of conduct, and failure to comply with that code of conduct can see regulatory action brought against the provider by the Commission as the regulator.
Thank you. Final question. What monitoring is involved for both registered and unregistered providers?
Thank you, Senator. The Quality and Safeguards Commission is responsible for the monitoring of both registered and unregistered providers. Much of our work is conducted as a result of either complaints received to the Commission or reportable incidents that we need to make further inquiries around the circumstances of particular incidents. Registered providers have obligations that they are required to report certain matters to us, certain changes of circumstances, and the Commission utilises that information to determine what regulatory action it might take.
Are there audits of this? It's not just self-reporting? Are there audits of these? It's not just self-reporting?
The audits, we do some proactive compliance monitoring work. Mm-hmm. They also have audit processes tied to their registration. The audit process relates to the standards that they must meet in order to maintain their registration.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Roberts.